Welcome to another episode on the Fearless Femme podcast with your host, Becky Jane Stevenson, women's identity and confidence mentor. So I know this episode was meant to go live yesterday, however, I had to wait for a new laptop arriving. Now, funny little story before we dig into this episode was my previous trusty laptop decided it was no longer willing to work, and I replaced it with another one which turned out to not be quite what I needed. It didn't even have a caps lock button, totally cannot work with that, so I had to go ahead and order another laptop. Pleased to say this one is absolutely epic. So apologies in the delay. I am about to dish the tea on this episode, and it's going to be a little bit different to what you've previously heard from me. So today's episode, I'm going to be pulling back the curtain on something actually quite personal that's been going on for me for the past 5 to 6 weeks. And that is my current struggle with obsessive compulsive disorder. And what that means for you in this episode as well, because as always, I mine for the gold in these experiences. So this episode isn't just a space for venting or even a pity party. I actually want to share the wisdom that has come through this period that I've been gifted with. And I want to share that with you all and what those setbacks could actually help you to see as well. So, as we know, life doesn't always look like a bed of roses. We know sometimes those struggles actually hold the best mirrors for us, reflecting what's missing, maybe what we've been avoiding. Yes, I know, the shadow stuff too. But also in this episode, I want to really walk you through the lessons that I've learned about disconnection, values, and rebuilding during difficult times, especially if you are in a space of doubting and questioning yourself, which seems to be actually quite common at the minute. A lot of people are going through this period of doubting themselves, questioning the path they're on and the things that they're doing, especially business owners. It's really been interesting to observe what's happening, especially in the social space when it comes to businesses, as I've been taking time to just be with myself, to nurture my nervous system and all of that good stuff. So if you are somebody who is in that doubting and questioning stage at the moment, which can feel really, really shitty, but it can actually be one of the most empowering spaces to be in. And without dropping a cliche here, yes, they say sometimes the breakthrough comes through the breakdown. So it doesn't really help in the moment when it's really sticky and you're in the trenches. But I want to share with you the empowering thing that can come from that, and what things that you can do and how you can come to choose to go at it from a place of curiosity instead of fear and resistance. So if you've ever felt stuck or feel like you've lost touch with yourself, then this one is definitely for you, this episode. So keep listening as we dig in, and definitely stick around until the end, because I want to share with you some tips and some reflective questions to help you recheck in with yourself, to reconnect. So let me start by saying this, if any of you are curious. OCD isn't just about quirky behaviours or being a neat freak or having to have things a certain way. OCD is a whole spectrum of things, and it can show up in lots of different weird and very terrifying ways, and it can be really deeply consuming, as I've experienced over the years. Now, normally for me, I experience a lapse or two every 15 to 18 months. So they're quickly worked through, I recognize them, I get the tools back in place, and they generally don't disrupt things for me. But lately, this lapse has been a little bit more challenging and more difficult to shift, despite doing the work, despite therapy, medications in the past, and doing exposure response prevention, which is the go-to approach for OCD. So this has been a little bit intense, shall we say. However, I actually sat with why this particular lapse for me with the OCD had become so intense. And it was because this year has been so full. This year has been so busy with personal things within my family and things to navigate, but also a lot of wonderful things that I've done this year, which I feel immensely proud of, might I add. But it's just been one of those years where really I'd not given myself the chance to take a breather, to sit back and really take stock of things. Because, you know, when we have that momentum, we don't want to let it go. We want to keep running and running and running. And sometimes we don't notice unless we're taking those moments to check in with how we're doing, how we're feeling, where our energy is at. Sometimes we actually override our body's need to slow down a little bit, to nurture it. Now, in September, I was recommended some books. Some of you may be fans, the Akatar series, and I was hooked. And I read the first 4 books within about 3 weeks. Like, it was insane. And I think because I gave myself so much downtime and so much peace to be with myself, is when my nervous system said, hey, this is all the stuff that you haven't addressed whilst you've been running with that momentum. So it kind of took me by surprise, and I think given the lapse and the need for rest and reflection and all the rest of it has just caused this particular lapse to be a little bit more tricky to navigate. Now, here's what has been interesting and how this relates to you and how this is going to be helpful for you. This experience with the OCD has put me in a position where I have to slow right down, not to a stop, kind of sidestep and really sit and reflect. Where have I been running on autopilot? Where have I been running with the momentum? And where in my life I have felt out of step or out of sync with what I initially set out to do when I started this business? And those questions are really tough. If you were to ask yourself right now, kind of where are you allowing the momentum to run the show? And what areas kind of feel a little bit out of step with the path that you set out on? Like, where is this journey taking you? And they are tough questions. But through asking yourself those questions, they do bring a whole lot of clarity with them. So this is what I kind of wanted to share with you all, and the things to really think about is how disconnection can be such a big indicator and such a big clue to where your next steps need to be heading towards. So being disconnected from yourself and your passions, even disconnected with your body, we actually miss the greater message that disconnection has. And that message is, hey, something isn't quite right here. Hey, you've shifted too far away from your values or what you desired for yourself, or the mission or the goal or whatever it may be. That disconnection is that message. It is saying, take some time to reflect, take some time to consider where you're at. Are you still excited by this? Do you still feel passionate about it? And I think sometimes we're very afraid to be radically honest with ourselves with those questions, because they are big questions and they can be really scary questions. And I think we can maybe avoid them sometimes because when we set out towards a specific goal, we think we have to stay true to it until we've achieved that goal, that we're not allowed to change our mind. Well, I'm here to say you can change your mind If it is not filling your cup up, as they say, if it's not bringing you joy, it's not bringing you that sense of excitement and fulfillment and everything that feels good, then why do we still do it? And it's because usually when we make a decision, we think that it's not okay to make a U-turn, or it's not okay to completely change our direction, when actually by sitting with that and saying, okay, this isn't what I thought it would be, this is no longer in alignment with what I want anymore, because we shift and we grow and we change, and it's okay to change direction if you are no longer feeling fulfilled on that particular path. So an example could be, pushing yourself to perform, to keep pushing yourself for productivity, to push yourself to keep getting clients and creating offers and whatever else that may be, especially those of you that may be in business. If you're not in business, then, what areas of your life are you pushing yourself and not living in accordance with your values, like kind of doing things simply because it ticks off the box. And when we're doing that, we're not asking ourselves, does ticking off this box bring me some joy? Does doing this thing bring me happiness? Does doing this thing bring me peace and fulfillment? So when everything feels overwhelming, big changes can really feel impossible to do. But we have to lean into the beauty of those small wins, those small steps. So here are some things that we can do, especially when we're asking ourselves those big questions, is journaling each day. Even if it's a brain dump in a Google Doc, which I typically do, journaling by hand and handwriting, or even sending yourself a voice note or getting a voice recorder. I have a very good friend called Iris who does that. And uses a dictator to record her thoughts, which is incredible, isn't it? Sitting with a thought without spiraling, so having a thought without assigning some kind of meaning or judgment on it is, we do that through journaling, and it's a great exercise to empty your mind if it's feeling a little bit full. Another one is giving yourself that permission to rest, to sit with things. If you have been pushing yourself and you've been doing a lot, then one of the biggest, most important things is giving yourself some downtime, because sometimes we continue racing ahead because we don't want to ask ourselves questions. Being with ourselves in the moments, if you are not used to it, can feel really uncomfortable, but it's in those spaces that you're going to get a lot of clarity. It's the small actions, it's the small steps that are going to build your momentum, not doing more. So during this time, the past 5 or 6 weeks, I have sat down and revisited some of my core values, some of the things that actually matter to me. And as it turns out, some of the things that I was prioritizing weren't aligned with what I had set out to do. So while this awareness can feel hard, it's actually quite freeing to get radically honest with yourself, especially if it reconnects you and plugs you back into what brings you fulfillment, or at the very least brings you a sense of clarity on what your next step needs to be. So this period has also helped me rebuild from the inside out, because we're not perfect. So I want to share with you some of the things that I implement, that I want to share with you, so that you can start to consider bringing some of these into your day-to-day life, and bringing in some of that beautiful honesty with yourself is saying no to things that drain your energy. Even if those things aren't really negative, because sometimes we cannot have what we want if our inner self is so full of doing, and we're not being a human being, and we're constantly pushing on this momentum cycle and doing and hustling and keeping busy. So even if we're doing stuff that takes energy, and that energy could be spent doing something that does feel fulfilling, we have to find where we're going to not sacrifice, but sometimes there are some things that do take our energy, that are good things in our life, but they're just not aligned with where we want to go or a goal that we want to achieve. So what are some things that you could say no to, regardless of whether they're positive or otherwise? The next is to really lean into the things that give you a sense of peace. Things like creativity and meaningful conversations is another one as well. So today, apart from looking after my family, all I've done is record this podcast and, interestingly, get very frustrated with crochet because one of my children asked if I would make them a scarf and it just would not turn out. So that's what I've been doing today, and it brought me a beautiful sense of peace, of just being with myself and being really relaxed. But actually, meaningful conversations is another big thing that I think we can really take for granted, is making sure that the conversations we're having with people aren't rooted in drama and problems to solve and people being negative. Just think about, even if it's just one or two people that you could contact and say, hey, have you got any availability or any time to jump on a Zoom and have a cuppa and have a catch up? I've done that like 3 times this week and had a cup of coffee with one of my friends because they live so far away. We've had a cup of coffee and it's been so nice just to have those conversations with people. The next is sit with how your vision for yourself right now is currently shaped. Is it still in line with what you want? Have things shifted? So this past month, it's also allowed me to shape that vision, how I want to show up, what I want to do, without trying to do the things that everybody says I must. So at the moment, my biggest ick is the bare minimum. Is the phrase the bare minimum. Now I get it, there ought to be a bare minimum that we allow for ourselves. Like the sky is the limit, obviously, but in terms of what we know we deserve, especially if you're in business, what we deserve to be paid and all that kind of stuff. But nobody actually gets to dictate what your bare minimum should be. So I have a big ick around that at the moment. But what I mean about doing things your way instead of the way everyone says that you should is, obviously there are so many amazing coaches, mentors, service providers out there, and all of their frameworks, all of their strategies are amazing and they work for some. But that doesn't mean you need to squeeze yourself into those strategies and frameworks if you don't feel like you are able to be yourself and do the things in the ways that feel great for you. So, where there is the wiggle room to do so, follow a strategy, follow a framework, but tweak it so that it works well. And if it doesn't, and if you're really not getting any benefit from something, then obviously don't break your payment commitments if there are any. But if you're not getting out what you had hoped for, maybe check in with whether you are utilising them to their maximum potential, or just consider coming away from them altogether. But at the end of the day, nobody can tell you what to do, but you have to decide for yourself. If, like memberships, for example, if you are in a membership that you are no longer showing up for and is just not aligned for you anymore, then why do we hold on to these things? So sometimes we have to ask ourselves the difficult questions. The next is to be vulnerable. Hell, even being willing to be vulnerable is the most powerful way that you can reconnect with yourself. Yeah, being vulnerable is one of the scariest things to do, right? So being vulnerable, even with yourself, is the most powerful way to reconnect with yourself, to ask that question, hey, where is it that I'm not feeling safe? Where is it that I'm not feeling confident? Where is it that I'm not feeling empowered? Where is it that needs my attention? And reconnect with yourself that way, because you cannot keep squashing things down and expecting to have room for the things that you want. There's only so much space in there. So what can you take away from this episode? So life will throw curveballs and it throws shit sandwiches. We all have the shit sandwich that we have to choose off the menu that sometimes we gotta eat. But there is wisdom in the mess, and you don't have to figure everything out. You don't have to figure every little step out. What if you could just choose one step and see where that path starts to lead you? Because the thing is, the path usually isn't laid out perfectly in front of you, and you've just got to keep taking those steps down it. That path will bend and shift to your will as you are taking those steps. It will become clearer. So you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have that big plan in place. Like, one of my pet peeves actually is trying to force myself into a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. I'm the type that goes with the flow, that likes to stay present, that likes to be in life. And because of my neurospicy brain, it usually means that if I set a goal or a plan for 2 years, I kind of rebel against it, and I find it really difficult. So therefore, I have to be as present as I can. And do you know what? That's just as amazing. It's just as amazing, because at the end of the day, we need what we need. So I want to give you some things to reflect on, to start small with, to reconnect with yourself. And I really want you to think about these. You can write them down. So the first thing is to really reflect on your core values. And I know, we all roll our eyes at core values, because everything seems to be, what are your values? The thing is, the values make up a huge part of who you are and your sense of being in the world. So the first thing is to reflect on your core values, the things that matter to you. Are they showing up in your daily life? Are you choosing to do things that are in alignment with those values? So really think about your day-to-day actions and activities. Are they truly coming from a place of value, or are we doing them because we think we should be doing them? It's a really big question, right? I want you to think about what one area of your life that might feel out of step with where you want to be. Now, I can't share something with you all at the moment because it is top secret, and all will be revealed in the new year. But I got so excited when I thought about this thing, and it just really lit my soul up in such a big way. The reason it's not coming yet is I want to start something off in the new year and go from there. And obviously I want to give myself some time to kind of recover from this OCD lapse as well. Also, we have Christmas. It's a highly stressful time when you have a lot of children. So I really want you to think about that one area of your life that feels out of step with where you want to be. The next question is to think about who or what helps you feel the most connected to yourself. So what helps you reconnect to your sense of being in this world? And I don't mean your business or your kids, like you. What gives you that sense of being anchored in to this earth, to who you are being, to how you are showing up? What helps you feel the most connected to you? Mine is music. Putting some music on, really dancing around, not caring the world, simply just being in that moment allows me to feel connected to me. So the next question is to think of what one small step that you can take after listening to this podcast that really feels more aligned to you than it ever has. What's one thing that you truly want to do that's in alignment with where you want to go, with who you are in the world? What's one thing that you're going to do once you've listened to this podcast? So, I know those are some really big questions, and this episode went quite deep, but if this episode connected with you in any way, and you know somebody who might really benefit from it, then share it with someone who might need it right now. And as always, please do feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. And there is now an option to leave a fan mail if you are listening to this episode from my Buzzsprout account. I would really love to hear your thoughts. And also, I would love any suggestions for another topic that you would like me to dig into, anything you would like to hear about. Please do drop your suggestions using that fan mail option. And until next time, stay fearless and stay connected to who you are. Mwah.